the favorite game of Chinese is weiqi, whereas the favorite game of the West in India is chess. In chess, the focus is on the king, which is the center. In the weiqi game, the focus is on the entire board, and the weiqi board is much larger than a chess board. And two, in chess, it is all about checkmate. It is about total victory, total loss. It is a zero-sum game, which is not the case with weiqi. In weiqi, the two players, they seek strategic advantage at various places on the board. Good morning. I recently attended the 11th Beijing Shangshan Forum, which had two exceptional characteristics. One, this forum was run exclusively by the People's Liberation Army. I don't think there is any other platform or forum in the world which is run exclusively by that nation's military. And two, this forum was much more than military diplomacy. It underpinned a very important concept called Global Security Initiative, which is one of the key things at the heart of China's global geopolitical strategy, and it is the responsibility of the PLA, and hence the keynote address at this forum was given by the Chinese Defense Minister. Now, before I proceed further in talking about the forum, it is necessary that we all understand what is this Global Security Initiative all about. Now, China is different. China is different from the West, it is different from India, because China has a different political history, its own experiences, and its own favorite game than the West and India. For example, the favorite game of Chinese is weiqi, whereas the favorite game of the West and India is chess. And these two games have two big differences. In chess, the focus is on the king, which is the center. In the weiqi game, the focus is on the entire board, and the weiqi board is much larger than a chess board. And two, in chess, it is all about checkmate. It is about total victory, total loss. It is a zero-sum game, which is not the case with weiqi. In weiqi, the two players, they seek strategic advantage at various places on the board. So much so that at the end of a game, to an untrained eye, it may just become a bit difficult to know exactly who has won the game, which side has won the game. And I think this is the reason, this thinking which comes from this game and their experiences, which is at the heart or which is behind what the repeatedly told the Americans, that there is enough room for both the countries to develop peacefully together on earth. And this exactly is the concept of the Global Security Initiative, which is about indivisible security, where the sides talk about relative and not absolute security. There is no zero-sum game. There is cooperative security, which implies that there is sensitivity for the sovereignty and the core concerns of all the nations. And most important, in the GSI, all the nations which have endorsed the GSI, and today around 100 nations of the 193 in the world have endorsed GSI. They see everybody else as equal. All nations are treated as equal. So this is the concept. Now let us see this thinking, this GSI, which comes from this thinking of the Chinese, how it translates in the Asia Pacific region. We know in this region, the Americans have what is called the integrated defense strategy. The strength of the Americans is its military power. It's a well-known fact. Now, their integrated deterrence has three elements. One is the deterrence per se of the US military. And the second is the role played by the allies and partners of America in support of integrated deterrence. So this is about blocks. This is about building military blocks, where India also, as an important partner, is part of Quad, and it is also part of the Indo-Pacific strategy. And the third element of the integrated deterrence are the military bases. Today, America, as the leading military power in the world, has something like 750 military bases across the globe, of which over 340 they encircle China. Now, if this is what integrated deterrence is about, let us consider things from the Chinese perspective, what they would be thinking. Now, the key problem of the Chinese is that they are a manufacturing nation, or the key manufacturing nation of the world, and they have an annual trade which includes their foodstuffs that come from Europe through the Red Sea, and their oil that comes from the Persian Gulf. Something like $4 trillion of trade, commercial trade every year. Their security is their main concern. From their perspective, this is how the things will look. So there is a security dilemma here. And the security dilemma is that whatever action the Chinese are taking or the PLA is taken is interpreted as an offensive or an aggressive action by the West, Americans and the Indians. Whereas from the Chinese perspective, what they are doing is taking a defensive measure which they cannot talk about openly because that exposes their weaknesses or vulnerability to the other side. So what they have done is much aligned with their thinking. They have also created structures, but absolutely different from what the Americans have done in integrated deterrence. So again, they have three structures. And their three structures, of course, the first is, which is absolutely essential, that the PLA have by itself, it should have deterrence against the US military, deterrence in the conventional field and deterrence in the nuclear field. They are separate. And that is what the PLA is doing, which the Americans and the Indians also are talking about, that they are building up their nuclear arsenal. They are doing that to create a credible nuclear deterrence. Now, as far as the military blocs is concerned, the allies and the partners of America are concerned, the Chinese strategy is not to have military blocs, but in my assessment, to have economic blocs. Take the case of ASEAN, 10-member nation. ASEAN in 1967 was created by the Americans and the Britishers, but it is the Chinese who was sensible enough to offer the free trade agreement to this 10-member collective club in 2000, and see where things are today. ASEAN collectively has an annual trade with China, which is now coming close to $1 trillion annually, which is huge. So the stake of the ASEAN as a whole is enormous in having peace in the region. And this is precisely what the Singaporean defense minister and other ASEAN members defense minister, they spoke at the Shangshan forum, that both the big powers are in our region, in Asia Pacific, but we do not want a security competition, an intense security competition which can tip over into a hot war in our region. They were very explicit about this. So this is the shield that the Chinese have created, and now they are creating another one in the African continent. For example, just a week before the Beijing Shangshan forum happened, in Beijing, there was a summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, where 53 of the 54 countries that comprise the African continent, they were present there. And they were addressed by spoke about $50 billion to be spent over 3 years on providing more connectivity to the African nations, their partners, then bringing in green industries there, doing manufacturing, helping them in that, bringing the skills to them. And now we hear that they have also announced, China has announced an aid of $360 billion to the African nations, which of course has been praised by the UN Secretary General. What is China doing? China has invested for the last 20 years in the African continent, and now it is doubling up. Because just like ASEAN, it is creating another economic bloc which will stand by it against the military power of the West and America. And third, what they have done is that instead of military bases, in my assessment, it is a wrong conception of the Americans that they will create, the PLA will create a lot of military bases in Indo-Pacific region, basically replicating their model. I don't think it will happen that way. What will happen is that certainly Chinese are worried about the choke points, and there are two major choke points when we look at their sea lanes of communications. There is a choke point called Bab al-Mandeb Strait, which connects your Red Sea with the Gulf of Eden. Now this is where the Chinese have created, or they have established, their logistics support base. They don't want to call it a military base. At Djibouti, which is the Horn of Africa, the same place very close by where the Americans also have a military base. And as far as the Persian Gulf is concerned, the Strait of Hormuz, the Chinese have their trusted friend Pakistan with their two deep sea ports in Karachi and Gwadar. So that is really taking care of the choke points. And plus, of course, they are likely to have one or two other places where, along the route, along these sea lanes of communications, where they would be looking for logistic support bases. But besides that, here is the key point, that Belt and Road Initiative, which was announced by in 2013, today has been endorsed by close to 148 countries out of the 193 countries in the world. In fact, except for India and Bhutan in South Asia, all the countries, other smaller nations, they are on board the BRI. Now, this has given a major task to the PLA, the BRI, because it is a key responsibility of the PLA to ensure that the Chinese people, Chinese infrastructure, Chinese interest in these countries, wherever the BRI is protected. And that can only be done through cooperative security, and hence the Global Security Initiative. So the long and short is that the PLA, through today, it is doing something like 100 military exercises with 150 nations, these smaller nations. This is all part of the Global Security Initiative, cooperative security. It is relative security, we support you, you support us, and this will grow. And this is being supported by the Maritime Silk Road, which is the maritime dimension of the Belt and Road Initiative, where you have hardware, cyberspace connectivity in the form of fiber cables, fiber optic cables, then the submarine cables, and the Beidou constellation, which is now gone global. So all this will be supported, and this is where the GSI fits in. So it is a cooperative relationship with all these small nations. Once we understand where the GSI fits in, let me now go over to the forum. Now the theme of this forum, the 11th Beijing Shangshan Forum, was promoting peace for a shared future. How do you promote peace? Through the Global Security Initiative. And what is this shared future? Well, shared future is about Global South. And what is Global South? Global South are those nations which are less developed, developing. Some are developing very fast. In fact, some of the fast growing economies are in this region, in what is called Global South today. So these are aspirational nations. They look like what used to be the third world countries during the Cold War, but they are very unlike them. Because these are, as I said, aspirational nations which do not want any further exploitation, which do not want colonization, which wants to have their own industry so that their own things are utilized for their people's development and prosperity. And this is where once again China has come up to the help. And of course Russia is also partnering here. And there are various things here, acronyms which have come up, all very important. There is Belt and Road Initiative, then there is Global Development Initiative, which is about the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. This is where the Chinese are helping a lot, because 15 of their Sustainable Development Goals, they align with the goals of the United Nations. Then I have already spoken about the GSI. Then there is Global Civilizational Initiative, which is about having respect for each other's civilizations, not exporting any ideology, not talking of exporting liberal democracy or exporting some ideology to any other country. And then they are supported by institutions like BRICS, like SCO, like AIIB, like Silk Fund Bank. So the long and short is that all these nations which constitute today something like 80% of the world population, they are what is called the Global South, and these are the countries which are getting a lot of support from China. In fact, if we sit down and think what China can give them, China can give them resources, it is giving them skills, it is giving them new technologies, and it is also promising them the artificial intelligence industries also to be coming in these countries. Because after all these industries, which is called the new productive forces today in China, has put a lot of focus on these within China. So once they mature within China, they will also come to Global South, and hence it will not be misplaced to say at all that there would be no Global South without China. This is a fact. So at this conference, what they had done was, coming back to specifically the GSI, all the countries which were there, whether big or small, whether it was the Deputy Defense Minister of Russia, whether it was the Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff of Pakistan, or it was the Defense Minister of Cameroon or Defense Minister of Gabon, all these countries, big or small, they were given equal time. They were given equal say on the same platform to discuss about peace and prosperity, what they want and how things are shaping up. The whole idea was to show respect that all countries are equal. So I think this was a very distinctive feature about. Now on the sidelines, there are a few things that I would certainly want to point out. One is, on the sidelines, I got an opportunity to speak with some officials, rather two officials who were there with the Deputy Director General of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and they were quite candid. They said they should not be named, and they said that they were not happy with India having done the SCO summit in a virtual mode. So according to them, India downplayed the SCO and it overplayed the G20 summit, and they were not happy about it. And the second point that they made was that India talks about being a bridge between the global north and global south. But they said that global north is about equality, and global north does not need a bridge to go to global south. If they want to go there, they can go without India. In fact, what the global south nations need, specific to the SCO, was that there should be cooperation amongst all the nation countries. That is what they say, and they say that perhaps there is a need for a veto power, so that one country, they mentioned India, it should not unnecessarily hamper or stop or delay the cooperation amongst other nations. I mean, of course, this is not happening, but this was a sentiment that I gathered there. And the second, of course, I want to talk about the Pakistan's Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee, General Mirza. Now, General Mirza basically made 2 points. He spoke about In fact, he said that Pakistan wants peace with India, but he said that there are two areas where sufficient stress has been generated in the strategic space. One is Kashmir, and the second he spoke about net security provider, India becoming the net security provider in the Indian Ocean region. So perhaps both these points need to be thought about objectively by analysts and the policy makers in India. Thank you so much.